activities such as money transmission operations, money broking, lending and pawning, money exchange operations. We have trust company operations. We have trading for own account or for the account of customers in money markets, checks, bills, exchange certificates, foreign exchange, financial commodity, derivative instruments, transferable or negotiable instruments, commodities, future trading, venture risk capital, financial guarantees and commitments, financing, leasing, individual and collective portfolio management, safekeeping and administration of cash or liquid instruments or securities on behalf of other persons, otherwise investing, administering or managing funds on behalf of other persons, underwriting and placement of insurance policies, etc. So those are some of the financial services business that licenses are specifically granted for individuals to undertake in. However, under the Offshore Banking Act number 8 of 1996, which also located on our website, offshore banks are only not permitted to do one activity, which is real estate, or any other activity that the minister in the act, it states minister, but because of the parent legislation which has handed on his authority to the without the permission of the financial services unit, which at present is myself. So any activity that the bank is to engage in that is not a financial service business, regulatory approval has to be sought. But once it's considered a financial service business, there is no restrictions or limitations that precludes that entity or licensed financial institutions from engaging in such activity.
If I understood that correctly, I picked up in there that asset management is acceptable for third party, for other individuals. Also, securities, instruments, where I heard mentioned in that all of these activities are permitted under these acts that you were quoting from. I don't think we have an issue here.
That's why I said, based on what you mentioned earlier, the activity you mentioned is a financial service business. Legislation do provide for financial services businesses to be conducted here.
Very cool. I'm just trying to think what would be another question. And then I guess the next question is corresponding bank. How do we figure out the corresponding bank? Because the bank that we're looking to buy doesn't come at a corresponding bank.
Well, with respect to correspondent banking, what I have seen, we have other offshore banks here who can facilitate or assist you in seeking correspondent banking. We have 21 banks, and those 21 banks are already have correspondent bank and have assisted other persons in getting correspondent bank. So once you become a licensed financial institution or you become licensed individuals or licensees, there are regulatory references and links that you can network to go about it. There is so by being party of that, you can network with the other shareholders of the other banks who can walk you through the entire regulatory process, as well as swift and correspondent banking relationships.
Is there any minimum or a maximum amounts? Is there any limits in order to do any form of financial transactions? When
you say limits, based on what you guys are speaking, those are internal policies and procedures that the bank decides.
Okay.
Our legislation don't place restrictions on policies and internal manuals and controls. The banks decide how much transactions, the volume of the transactions. What our legislation provides for is KYC and CDD and all this on those transactions, but it doesn't place any limitation on the quantum of those transactions, etc.
Okay. So it's just basically up to the internal bank itself to just make those decisions.
That's a banking decision.
Perfect.
Got it.
Perfect.
And then are there? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ronak.
I wanted to just know that is there any other special type of taxation or anything that's done upon the banking industry that may not be similar to that of other countries or other Caribbean islands?
Well, banks prior to July 31st of this year, there was exemption on income. Banks were exempted from paying income revenue and taxes on revenue. The OECD, by virtue of their phase 2 peer review report and common reporting standard, has placed on jurisdictions the obligation to remove all favorable and what they consider harmful tax practices which favors one institution or jurisdiction over the other. Therefore, that special concessionary measures that were placed on banks not being taxable was removed. So as of this financial year, banks will become taxable on income, I think, which is 15% on that's what exists as of this financial year. Prior to that, banks were exempted from paying taxes on revenue.
Got it.
Okay.
Is there anything that will have, let's say we buy a bank in your jurisdiction, is there anything that will have you change your mind tomorrow and have you come back and say, hey, I've changed my mind? You cannot do high yield program as an example.
Well, that's not how these things happen, sir. If the bank or its directors, shareholders, employees are in breach of regulatory or legislative obligations, there are penalties and other applicable enforceable means of corrections that we apply. And under Section 13(6) of the Offshore Banking Act, as well as Section 10 of the Financial Services Unit Act 9 and 10, gives the power to write to the minister to take remedial measures. One such of those measures under Section 13 is the revocation of the bank license should the bank be in breach of the regulatory codes, practices, and the legislative obligations. But we don't operate like a pop shop. We don't change mind like girlfriend, boyfriend business. This is merely regulatory and legislative. And once the financial institution find itself regulatory compliant, it's not a question of we change mind. We don't operate in a personal atmosphere. This is merely regulatory, totally regulated. And once the institution keeps within the regulatory framework, they don't have to worry. They sleep well. In the absence of then it's a different language.
Got it. Understood. William, I'm sure you have a few questions to ask. Okay, Jonathan, Richie, I'm sure you have a few questions to ask.
So far, I prefer to read through the paperwork before I asking the question.
Okay, got it. Understood. Okay, Jonathan, do you have any questions to ask?
Well, I was going to ask some questions, but they've already been asked and answered. So
Okay.
I think those are the ones I was going to ask. And Claudio, thank you very much for the information. It was very helpful. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claudio. That was really amazing. And I get the sense from your energy that you're a good person to work with, if I can say that way.
I'm a regulator. Rid of the regulators. I prefer it that way. That you're not scared. You're intimidated. My focus is that institutions and licensees comply with the legislation, and once that is done, then we're good.
What are the biggest frustrations you have in your job with the banks you're managing right now, if I may ask?
Well, we have several challenges, and one of these common challenges is you operate in a space that is international. So you have institutions licensed here but operating externally. And when you have institutions operating externally, you have challenges. And no matter how good you think you know the institution, you may not really know the institution well. So the scope of international financial institutions like banks can be very challenging, because banks can tell you or prepare a nice balance sheet and tell you we're doing commercial banking and we're actually doing something else. And that's really a challenge to assert certain facts in the absence of mere presence and so forth. That's a challenge. The other challenge is that we see with the offshore sector is that the banks are actually all basically doing the same product, the same business, and there is a request now for moving to digital currencies and crypto markets, and that is relatively new for us as regulators in that part of the world, and that poses a challenge because of limited regulatory oversight for such services and products. And then you have stubborn directors and shareholders and persons who are not dishonest, who are not honest with reporting, who are not honest with what they're doing, who are not honest. And you have scams who just basically out there trying to take money from innocent people because they see an avenue. And that's why one of the things that we are focused on now is to ensuring that things like the capital requirement is strictly maintained, because you have people who now think like, okay, you have $1 million in capital, which is what the law speaks up to, and you get a banking, and yeah, you go about and you don't give the regulator or the government that $1 million, and you use it as paid up capital, and you can utilize it, and then the balance sheet reflects at the end of the year that you don't have $1 million in capital, but you've made 70-80 million from people. So those are challenges that we see. We've seen a high interest from the Asian market, where people don't really want a bank, they just want the name bank appended to some association or business company that they have for marketing purposes, where they can generate revenue. So it is an ever evolving area. I can tell you why I sit here for the past 16 years. I have seen and heard everything. So it is a very interesting and challenging job, because people come up with all creative ways to just either look at avenues and make money, but not really focus on core banking. Actually, not many people do banking. They get a bank license, but they involve in other products and services that's not directly related to banking. And then correspondent banks now squeeze them down their throat, because they realize more and more people are just not doing banking and using the offshore financial licenses as avenues to facilitate their financial services and products. But it gets back to if that is the objective, people always get caught, because then you get correspondent bank is going to do their due diligence. They're going to ask for supporting documents. They're going to ensure that you're really bona fide before getting you on board onto their systems. So there are quite a few challenges, but we've over time been able to deal with them individually and address them as they go along. So yes, I would say it's challenging. It's one of the most challenging sectors for us, because it's done externally. So we have to go by what we are told and the virtual communication, etc. But it's something we've gotten a grip of, and the sector grows. As I said, it's one thing we don't play with is the reputational risk of the jurisdiction. And once banks or licenses are found and wanting to carry any reputational risk, we will take the necessary actions by reprimanding them and revoke the license. And if you look at our website, you will see the list of banks and those that have been revoked over the period of time.
And then if you were going to buy a bank in your jurisdiction, other than the taxes that obviously we would be happy to pay, is there any expectations of us? For instance, let me be careful in how I ask that question. Knowing you have some requirements, like have $1 million liquidity, no problem. Pay your taxes, no problem with that. Putting all that aside, is there any other requirements we have, such as you must invest, let's say, 50% of your profits in businesses on our island? Is there any other requirements that expectations you have of us?
Hey friends, so in this part of the video, I want to talk about the frequently asked questions we get from you, the viewer. Number one biggest question, I guess, Taimour, we watch a lot of your videos. We like to engage your organization and help access capital that traditional banks wouldn't be able to provide to us, or help us monetize a banking instrument, or help us understand how to go into a private placement program. How do we engage you and your team? And the answer is in 3 specific ways. One, and it's the best way, is to go to our website, lineofcredit.ai, and book a consulting call with us. Me or any of our senior associates would be happy to meet with you, understand the project, understand the challenges you're dealing with, and help you through it like that. We get a lot of compliments for our ability to execute when others can't, for years of experience and expertise, for sure. The second is you can get a copy of our book, Hypergrowth, How to Connect to Customers and Investors in New Ways. You get access to various investment strategies, how to talk to a banker, how to connect to a customer, how to get your next investor line out. The third is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll access customer walkthroughs, case studies, strategies, banking instruments, closing of banking procedures, like a lot of stuff that sometimes your own banker wouldn't even know some of these strategies and content, nor would your chief financial or legal officer like that. So I highly recommend subscribe to our YouTube channel. The second question, I guess, Taimour, when companies are choosing you or LineofCredit.ai, why are you guys winning compared to alternative options? In the past, my answer would have been because we provide higher LTV, or when we provide capital, we can provide far more than your bank can, and we cover geographies internationally that perhaps your bank doesn't. In the past 2 years, what I've really started to discover is the reason a lot of chief legal officers, CEOs, capital companies are choosing us consistently is simply because of our years of experience, our expertise, and our ability to execute. Next next question that you usually get is, Taimour, which customer base do you best serve? If I was your ideal customer, who am I? The truth is, everybody in our team speaks English somewhat fluently. And so I like to think that we are best relevant to business owners that are English speaking, people around the world. You must have some kind of liquidity ready to go, a minimum of $1 million for sure. You need access to a large amount of capital, whether it's cash, whether you want to monetize a banking instrument or participate in a private placement program. That's the market we typically serve. We operate just like a law firm. So when you contact us, it becomes a billable hour, and what you're paying for is our years of experience, our expertise, and to really be able to execute on projects that your banker or your chief legal counsel or whoever you work with typically can't help you with. This is a funny question, and I get this often. I hear that there's a lot of litigations against some of our competitors, whether it's a private placement program or a bank that promised to loan money they didn't, whatever the deal is, and how come we don't have any litigations against us? There's two answers to that. The first answer, the corporate answer, is that me and our team operate in a very high level of integrity. We take on projects that we can deliver on, like all that corporate stuff. Now there's a truthful answer, and the truthful answer is me as a CEO of LineCredit.ai. My vision hasn't been big enough for me to try to disrupt the world, and I failed at that vision, because if you look at the largest corporations or the largest brand names in your household, whether you use Google, whether you drive a Ford car, whether you have tunnel when you have headache like that, a lot of the brand names in your household that you use have litigations as part of their business. Look them up, look at their financial statements. They all have lawsuits against them. And so I feel the fact that we don't have any litigations, or we don't have people on social media bad-mouthing us or creating drama stories like that, is my failure in trying to push the company at a new heights like that. And that's the truthful answer on why we don't have litigations against us, for sure, as the day we're shooting this video. Final question I do want to answer is, Taimour, we've seen law brokers who have made millions and millions of dollars working with your firm in less than a year. Do you have any kind of a program, because I'm interested in becoming an associate or broker within your organization? The answer is yes. If you go to LineCredit.ai, we're always looking for brokers who have experience. Our target brokerage is a broker who has a book of business, who comes from the financial services industry, whether it's retail banking, wealth management, is a former legal attorney like that. Those are the target audiences we like to work with, just because what we offer is so niche, so sophisticated, and so wanted. And it's ideally an institution or a brokerage that has a bunch of agents, and they're looking to provide some advisory services, some banking expertise that they simply don't have right now. My name is Taimour Zaman. My team and I look forward to the opportunity of working with you. Thank you very much for your time.
I've held various positions in leadership in private sector, in governmental sector, as well as nonprofit sector. And it's just been an amazing experience working with Taimour. He's been the first time that I connected with him.
Thank you.
I have this really deep connection, with you, Taimour. And I feel that I've been doing a lot of meditating and praying to the Lord to kind of give me a pathway in which I can do this work.
And basically with Taimour just get things done. And basically he's the guy, when you have a problem, he's the guy that you're going to call to get the problem solved. So,
now I'm going to get 10,000 calls that I don't need.
I want to go into the 250,000 or the DCL program that you mentioned on your website, and I want to earn like millions of dollars in non-recourse loan. Right now here in the Philippines, my company, Gemini ANC Development Corporation, and hopefully we could have a very fruitful and profitable relationship in the near future. And I look forward to working.
Awesome. Thank you so much for trusting us.